Good evening. Welcome to Team Leadership Radio. That's TEEM, Train, Equip, Empower, and Mobilize Leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Cecilia Martin, and we are kicking off season two, y'all. I'm so excited because it's going to be just as amazing as season one. In fact, I have with me tonight Dr. Nkeiru Okoye, who is an American composer born in New York City, New York, and raised on Long Island. After studying composition, music theory, piano, conducting, and Africana studies at Oberlin Conservatory, she pursued graduate studies at Rutgers University and became one of the leading African American women composers. An activist through the arts, Dr. Okoye creates a body of work that welcomes and affirms both traditional and new audiences. Hailed as gripping and evocative by the New York Times, her works have been commissioned, performed, and presented by Detroit Symphony, Philadelphia Orchestra, Baltimore Symphony, Opera North UK, Juilliard School, Houston Grand Ole Opera, and it goes on and on and on. From Boston to Chicago to Charlotte to Tulsa, the Moscow Symphony, I give to you no other than the extraordinary Dr. Nkeiru Okoye. Welcome, Dr. Okoye. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Cece. I am so delighted to be here. And I just have to tell your audience that, I just love you so much. You are my sister, you are my friend. And I remember when we were both in Baltimore and you were just starting Team.
Yeah.
I'm just so, I was just looking at it. And I was like, wait a minute, Team TEAM. And you said, no. And I was just thinking, wow. And so I am teaming with pride for you, team.
Oh, yes. I love it. Thank you so much. And the feeling is mutual. And, I am so grateful to have been on part of your journey with you, like you said, since, oh gosh, way back when in Baltimore, just to see the incredible work that you've done. I mean, you were brilliant then, and now the world knows it. The world is beginning to know it. Now, your mother is African American and your father Nigerian. What is the meaning of your name exactly?
Well, my name is from it's Nigerian culture. It's Igbo. My father was Igbo, and my name means the future is great, or also the future is greater than the past. So I love my name. Every time people say it, they are prophesying over me. So I love it. I love it. I love it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that is really powerful. I mean, and it's so true because your future is so much brighter than your past. And it goes on and on and on. They named you adequately. I can tell you that much. I mean, I can't wait to dive into the work that you've done. You're such an incredible individual. You're actually a part of living history as we know it. Now, you were introduced to music as a child, and I just want to know what ignited the passion or interest, particularly in classical music.
Well, it's really a two-part question. Because the first thing is that we had a little organ in my house. And apparently I was just one of these kids who would just, I would just go over to the organ and I would just put my fingers on it. And I wasn't from one of these musical families. Like, my father was an electrical engineer and my mother she's retired now, but an occupational therapist. So these are two people who are sciences. And at one point, my mother had been, actually, when she enrolled in college at Ithaca, her original thought was to be a music education major because she really enjoyed the chorus when she was in high school. And her first semester, she realized that was just not to be. So we still had this little organ in the house, but nobody played it. And so I would just go over and I would just, I didn't know how to play, and not no one came by to teach me how to read music, but I was just, this is just, I like the way this sounds.
Wow.
So, so it just came to me naturally is my point. Now, the reason I said it's a two-part question is that, my mother would not, generally, we would not play secular music in her house.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, we grew up in I'll say a very strict, fundamentalist background. I suppose that's redundant, strict and fundamentalist. Um,
Not necessarily. I get it. I get it.
yeah,
I
right.
get the redundancy, honey, because my mother was strict too.
Right.
So,
Yeah, yes. So, obviously you would have other music coming in because we weren't in one of these enclosed societies,
hmm.
but I would hear we would play WQXR, and that was in New York. That's the classical music radio station. So we would hear that, and we would hear the Christian radio station, and we would hear the news, and that's what we would hear on the radio.
Mm.
So that was the music that I knew. I knew that, and I knew some of the hymns from our it's a white Southern Baptist church that we started out going to. And so, we would hear that and, some of the different types of things, but that was the music that I knew. So that's how I gravitated towards classical music. It wasn't classical music, that was just the music that I knew.
Yeah, I get it. I totally
Yeah.
get it. That's amazing. So you have an organ in your house.
Mhm.
How old were you when you started playing? And do you play any other instruments? Because I know you play piano as well.
Right. Well, actually, I don't play the organ.
Oh,
Um,
really? So the organ was there.
well, we had it, and because I really wanted to play it, someone gave us a piano.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I just, and we didn't go to one of these churches where you're having gospel music being played. So it's not like I would pick it up from by ear.
Mm.
And so yeah, so and also my mother had worked in missions. She worked on a mission in Dutchess County, New York, which is in lower New York State, but for New Yorkers proper, they would call it upstate, but it's not upstate. It's just about an hour north of Manhattan. And
Mm-hmm.
so with this type of background, that's why someone had given us a piano. And so I had it, and about seven, about 7 years old, I had my first music lessons, and I learned how to read music, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we have the piano,
Right.
and you are obviously excelling because you started composing at age 13?
I did, but let me go back because you asked if I played other instruments, and it's kind of a compound. They kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
I was in the school band and orchestra. And, with the piano, because of the layout, the obvious thing to do is to play the glockenspiel. So I would play the glockenspiel. But
Mhm.
the glockenspiel those are those bells, the orchestral bells. So I play that.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, okay.
Mhm, mhm. And then I also played the oboe. And the oboe, there's no real good way to describe the oboe, because if I describe it as a double wind, it's like that just doesn't help.
No, it doesn't.
But it kind of looks like a clarinet. It's a bit skinnier than a clarinet.
Okay.
And people say the sound is a little bit duck-like.
Gotcha. Okay. I
Yeah.
follow now.
Right. So that has the same fingering as the alto sax. And when I say fingering, I just mean when you put your fingers on in a certain formation,
Hmm.
you're going to hear a note. And it's got basically the same fingerings as the alto sax and as the flute and some of these other instruments. And so when I got to junior high school, the band director said, you can't play an oboe. There's just no such thing as, I don't think there's such thing as oboes for the marching band. So he got me on the alto sax, and so that's how that happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let's go back, because you had also asked about my writing music at 13.
Yes.
Okay. When you really, really think about it, I had always been writing music. I wrote
Okay.
down my first composition at 13. So let me just clarify, because clarification helps.
Mm-hmm.
I would make up these songs in my head, and I hadn't really thought that it was anything special. So I just remember, we read a lot in the house. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember typically there were these Beatrix Potter books. And I remember Beatrix Potter, not just because she's an amazing children's author, but I just remember reading that about Peter Rabbit. And so I remember reading that he opened the window, or maybe he opened the door, and he would
Mm-hmm.
sing his morning. And so, there's a little poem in there. And so, I, of course, sang the song because I
Mm-hmm.
thought everybody did that. And it was years later, and I was thinking, you didn't also hear that
No,
song?
no, we did not.
Everybody. So, yeah. So, how we discovered that I was a composer is different. I was advancing through the music program, and I
Mm-hmm.
had outgrown the neighborhood piano teacher. So we had gotten me a professional teacher through a number of things. And ironically, she played for the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. So she would play the celesta.
Mm-hmm.
And um, the celesta sounds like little bells. And so when you hear the nutcracker during Christmas time, that's thump, bum, 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 that little chimey thing,
Mm-hmm.
that's the celesta. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I would go down, and I would have those lessons from her, and it was for most of a summer. And she thought, I think you're ready. You can get into one of these famous prep schools. So I'm going to prep you to get into one of these schools, and I think you're really going to do something in music. So let me do this for you.
Wow.
Yeah. So I worked harder than I ever had. And I would be there, twice, 3 times a week, and she would just work with me, and she'd give me these ultimate coachings. And
Mm-hmm.
so we got me into one of these prep schools for music, and I was just completely floored. And we were not able to get me in the studio that she had a friend who had this one studio. In a studio, that's the students that you have. And so, you'd have so many, this student, this student, this student. And so this is your studio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So her studio was full.
Okay.
Well, so then they sent me to this arrogant young man who, happened to be white, and he did not want me to be in his studio.
Oh my.
Yes. And so now as an adult, I can look and say, this is what was going on.
Sure.
He was just not at all impressed with this Black child who was shy and withdrawn and introverted. And a couple of weeks, I think it might have been a month,
Mm-hmm.
by schlepping all the way up to Manhattan and sitting through these different classes, and then going to be in his studio and taking lessons from him. And he told me that I would never be in music, that
Wow.
I had no talent, and basically I could chop my fingers off, it would not damage my playing.
What?
Yeah, see, these are things that will scar and
Oh my gosh.
and so you know, I love telling this story, not because I turned around, everyone's thinking, oh, this is where you just tell this jerk off. And no, that's just not what happened.
Oh my gosh.
I was devastated. And,
Yeah.
these are things that, these are gender things. These are race things. These are biased behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
We can deal with now in society because we're better equipped to deal with them.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at that time, that's just not where things were. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was so impacted by what this man said, it triggered something. And so this is kind of my, those X-Men movies where, you see that the superpowers, the supernatural powers
Yeah.
usually happen to a young kid, someone who's in the teenage years, formative,
Mm-hmm.
and something traumatizes them, and they suddenly develop this. They finally get this power, and it unleashes.
Yeah.
So he unleashed this.
He unleashed it. Listen, he unleashed it, and I hope you know his. You know where his whereabouts is, so you can send him your New York Times reviews.
And I'd love to thank him because he got me to pay attention to this music that was just exploding in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back down to my school district where everyone is, I'm still the new girl in school, and people just knew that I had some talent in music.
Mm-hmm.
And so this guy tells me that I have no talent, I'm wasting my time. And so I go to the band director, who was a Black man and used to be he still is a Black man, and
I gotcha.
he used to play in some of the pop groups,
Mm-hmm.
70s and 80s,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I realized this girl is writing music. So he
Mm-hmm.
showed me how to write it down, and I paid him for it, not composition lessons, but they were music theory lessons. And so he was,
Wow.
then that's, there's an art to writing down music, and it's just like learning grammar,
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
how do you write this down and how do you recognize the words? And so he
Mm-hmm.
was teaching me that, and he told me how to write out this composition. And I called it phase 2 because I had always thought of myself as a pianist. And
Mm.
so I thought, oh, this is my requiem for my music career. So this is my next phase. Let's call it phase 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he gets me to enter it into this competition. And it's the local branch of the NAACP, and the competition is called Act So.
Mm.
It's kind of I've forgotten what that acronym is for, which is an awful type of thing. Let's see, it's the African American Cultural, Technological, Scientific Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which
So
I did not know existed. Okay.
yes. So this is for Black high school students
Mm-hmm.
all over the country. And you'd go through your local branch, and then from the local branch, you would get to the nationals, or sometimes they would have regional branches. So he had me enter this thing, and I kept telling him, but this man, this white man has told me that I have no talent. And it wasn't like this white man, but this man knows everything because he's at Hoity Toity Music School.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's gonna have the influence at that.
right.
Yeah.
And so he just said, why don't you let them tell you, at least enter this thing. So I said, well, let me do the piano and I'll enter this piece, but it's not going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Well, girl, it won. It didn't just win in the local branch, and it
Wow.
and these were just regular people. So I had to come out of classical music world, which was my little secret, it's my little, I don't want to say secret, but it's that place that I would explore. And it's that world that, that as an introverted child, I would escape into this world. Well,
Right. Yeah.
I had to come out of this world because the folks at the NAACP were wonderful folks. They were very, they wanted to do concert. They would go to concerts, but that wasn't their world. And
Right,
so
right.
I had to invest this thing that they had in me. All right. So apparently it worked. I get there to the national competition. Now you have to see this. There's thousands of Black high school students,
Yeah,
and they're in all the different disciplines, all the arts and sciences, and they're representing their local branches. And so this is
sure.
something that probably every kid, everyone should see, because this is Black excellence. And so, music composition, it was the smallest of these, and there are all these guys. And they're all tall too. This is the thing. They're all looking down at me. And they were, remember, North Carolina, South Carolina. They're all these really
Yeah.
big, and they were coming from the Governor's School of the Arts, the whatever it is, School of the Arts, and I didn't have that. And they had all known each other from all these other years, and
Okay.
blown everybody over with a feather when I won.
My goodness.
And it was on my 14th birthday, so that was my present.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so incredible. As you're telling your story, I think about unsung heroes and people in the arts, particularly African American females,
Yeah.
like Missy Copeland. Like, I'm totally seeing your life as a movie in the making. I mean, the story itself is just incredible, and there are too few female African American composers that get to the level where you are now. So I am just sitting here. That's an amazing story, and it really should be on the big screen, I think, if anyone's listening.
All right. Well, you know, I know a disproportionately high number of Black female composers there,
Yeah.
but there are not enough of us.
Yeah.
There not, yeah.
Yeah. So you went on, my goodness. So you went on to, of course, graduating from high school and all that good stuff. So you attended Oberlin Conservatory of Music. Now, my daughter attends a conservatory in New York,
Mhm.
and it's very intense. But for those unfamiliar with the concept, can you explain what a conservatory is and how it enhances the educational experience of an artist?
Okay. Well, a conservatory, and I think there's conservatories for dance and for theater.
Yeah.
Conservatory of music, it is intense. You think of MIT, you have the best and the brightest, and they all know they're the best and the brightest,
Yep.
and they're all under one roof. And
Yep.
so, here's the conservatory, and so you have these tons of kids. We're all at the top of our games in music. We're under one roof. And, at Oberlin, they're an all Steinway school. So there's an entire wing of practice
Mhm.
rooms in the main conservatory building, and it's filled with grand pianos that are all Steinway and Sons.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so we're all right. It's regardless of what your background is, you are there now. This is the great leveling, it's the great it's the leveling, what do you call that? The leveling ground.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
So
The
regardless,
leveling ground and the proving ground.
absolutely, absolutely. So we are all competitive. We're competitive with each other.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
we're intense. We're practicing all the time,
Yep.
4 hours a day, 6 hour days, and you're waiting to get into that practice room.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, my daughter, she calls me all the time from New York.
Mhm.
And she's often leaving the theater room at 11 at night.
Yes.
All of them are,
Yep.
so I mean, it's like you said, it is a leveling ground, it's a proving ground all at the same time. It's
Yeah.
extremely competitive,
Yes.
um, but in a healthy way because it challenges you in your field, in the art of your genre. So yeah, it is incredible. Now you went on, so after that intense experience of being at a conservatory,
Mhm.
you went on to get your doctorate in music theory and composition at Rutgers University.
I
And
did.
there you wrote and conducted a composition entitled The Creation, where the critically acclaimed actor Danny Glover narrated parts of your work. What was that like for you?
Oh gosh, you are taking me back. The conservatory is competitive, but it also, you make friendships, you meet mentors
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. At at most conservatories, there's a very small number of African Americans, and even
Yeah.
a smaller number of African American professors. And
Yep.
so I didn't have one. I didn't have a mentor when I was at Oberlin, but I found one. Someone, my mother's stepmother, was in a reading group with a Black composer, and his name was Noel DaCosta.
Okay.
So the day I met him, he decided I was going to be his last student. And so he had been through Rutgers for 25 years at that point,
Wow.
and had never had one Black student to get
Wow.
it. And so he said he just picked me.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So this relates because that's how I ended up at Rutgers.
Mm.
And in terms of it being competitive, we're all competing for, in the composition program, there's one spot once a year where one student would have their composition performed by the orchestra.
Yikes.
Right. Now, we had
Okay.
a famous composer on campus, and it
Yeah.
wasn't my teacher. So
Yeah. Who had chosen you as their last student?
but it was always his student. So
Yeah.
my teacher calls me my second year and says, "Oh, congratulations!" And I said, "Wait, what?" And so it was going to be my piece that was done. And
Incredible.
so this is a piece called the Genesis. So if you're keeping track, there's the Genesis and then there's the creation. It
Mm-hmm.
was a bit of my upbringing, and so all this to say that it put a rather sizable target on my head
Yeah.
when you are a person who is not you're not amongst that chosen group. Also, I'm not white, I'm not male, and somehow they chose my piece.
Yeah.
So perhaps out of retaliation, and perhaps because there's this whole invisible quality of being a woman and being Black, you know
Yeah.
they got together, and they probably were all doing this anyway, but they had a concert, and they called it the Composers of Rutgers University, and it was at Carnegie Hall because one of them had an internship there.
Mm.
Invite me to be in the concert, though I had just won this competition. And so I go,
Oh my goodness.
so I am sobbing. I'm just not going to do anything in music because they're never going to let me in. And
Mm.
so we had this Haitian woman, and she was one of the, I think she was the Black woman on faculty, and she was a pianist, and she said, "Nkeiru, we will not do that. If you're going to make your own opportunities, and if they will not invite you to come in, you will do your own thing. So we're going to do a Black History Month concert."
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So we did my first, and the first was okay, and then they gave me money they gave me grant funding and whatever, and they gave me a date on the calendar for my second concert, and they said that it needed to be better.
Okay.
And being competitive with yourself is sometimes the best competition that you can
Oh
have,
yeah.
because right,
Yeah.
that's right. We need something that's going to be so spectacular that it's going to leave a mark.
Yeah.
And
No
also,
pressure though.
right,
No pressure.
right. Because we're all waiting for you, we're watching you, and also they also what did they do? They set up another competing concert that afternoon, like earlier in the day.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the
Wow.
type of thing that would just tick you off.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
So I said, all right, so we have to do something that is really spectacular. So we called in yet a third Black woman to be on our committee, and she was a faculty member. And I said, well, we're going to have to find a celebrity.
Oh,
And
okay.
right.
Let's go find one.
So we're talking this over, and she said, will Danny Glover do? I was thinking, yeah, I think he'll do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
So, and she says, Danny. This woman's name is Abena Busia. Her sister, also Busia, was Nettie in The Color Purple.
Ah, so they
Right.
actually just called Danny Glover up. Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, right. So that is how that happened. And I don't know what it was that she said, but he agreed to come out and participate in this program. And, he didn't charge anything for it. We obviously had to raise the money to get him there.
Sure.
But yeah, yeah. So this was
Wow.
amazing. It was amazing. And I just remember, I'm writing this music and I'm producing the concert. And I thought, wow, I need to never, ever do the writing and producing again, which is, these are things that you should never say that you're never going to do something because you actually don't know what is in
Mm,
store for you, right.
yeah.
But this was one of the most amazing experiences that I had ever had at that point. And I can still think of him just standing, his presence. And there was a picture in the paper. It was the next day or the day after that. And, here's my career, and you're looking at it, and it was looking really, really amazing. So I'm just very
Mm.
thankful. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you, I am sitting here with, glazed over eyes because, again, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for years. And when I see the evolution of who you are as a person, who you are as a composer, and I'm glad the rest of the world is hearing your story because you are literally a piece of living history. And I'm seeing this on the big screen, Dr. Okoye. I really am, okay? And you are literally a piece of living history. In fact, there's a children's coloring book of Black composers, um,
And
and you're in it.
I actually, it's funny. I'm actually on the cover of it.
Yes, you're on the cover of it. I mean, this is really extraordinary. Would you consider yourself or I want to know what do you because I want to dive into some of your work.
Okay.
So, what would you consider, and I have special pieces that I want to talk about, but what would you consider your breakthrough piece that puts you on the map with the likes of Florence Price and Margaret Bonds and Julia Perry, just to name a few?
And we're going to add Tanya Leon to that because
Yes.
Tanya Leon just got the Kennedy Center honors.
Yes.
Black woman composer.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 One day you may be there too. Yes?
Well, your lips to God's ears, Dr. Martin. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm going to say there were two different pieces.
Mm-hmm.
The first piece was called Voices Shouting Out. And this is an orchestra piece that I wrote in 2002. It was inspired by 9/11.
Mm.
I was down in Norfolk, Virginia, and the orchestra was the Virginia Symphony. They had someone come out and meet me, and I was teaching down at Norfolk State. And they thought, okay, let's have the new composer, let's give her a chance, and let's put her on this Black History Month program that they do. And
Mm-hmm.
then 11 happened, and I thought, wow, I'm really really depressed. I mean, I was just really, especially as a native New Yorker, this
Yeah.
just impacted me in so many ways. And also, this is the time that I realized I'm the adult in the room. There I am, we're in Norfolk. We're in, I think that is the largest naval base on the Eastern Seaboard. And so
Mm-hmm.
none of us are on, and we could be bombed at any moment. And I'm thinking, wow, there needs to be some adult that tells us what to do. And it occurred to me, I'm that adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a very sobering moment, and for all of us, and for all of these people who were losing their lives, and the heroes that we had in the aftermath and the fallout. And so, this piece that was my first, I think it was my first orchestra commission, should have been such a joyous thing, and
Yeah.
now suddenly it's become a 9/11 thing. And I really thought about that. And I started writing these kind of somber things. And then I said, let me not write that terrorism into my music. And so when you hear the piece, it sounds it's defiant, it's strong, there's joy in this piece, and there's a middle section where it sounds a little bit like contemporary gospel music. And so this was this piece that put me on the map. People said, oh, voices shouting out. Okay. So there was this conductor who loves this piece, and he programmed it with all of these different orchestras. And
Mm.
so, yeah, so that was my first piece to really take off.
Mm-hmm.
My next big piece was about Harriet Tubman. And you and I had just met,
Yeah.
and I started doing this thing on Harriet Tubman. And, it ended up being an opera through this long, long
Mm-hmm.
story. But in operas, there are arias, there's these songs that your heroine, your hero, your secondary figure, they sing these show-stopping numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put 4 of them together, and it's called a song cycle. And so it's called the Songs of Harriet Tubman. And people sing those songs. And there was a soprano named Louise Toppin who made a recording of these arias.
Mm-hmm.
And people would just sing them. I remember there was a recording, there was this one woman at a conference, and I don't know, I stumbled upon this thing, and I saw a woman singing my music a cappella at the conference. I'm thinking, wow. Yeah. And people will call me up, and they'll contact me through my website, and they want to know about Harriet Tubman, about my Harriet Tubman, what's your path to it.
Yeah.
I've got people writing. There's a young woman right now who is doing her master's degree, and she's doing her master's recital on the songs of Harriet Tubman.
Wow. Okay. So now you're
Yeah,
definitely part of the research books now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is my formative piece, and it told people that I'm an opera composer, and that was my first opera. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, you have
those
an
2 pieces.
extraordinary repertoire, and I I I want to focus on one of your pieces that was so moving. I have never seen anything like this or heard anything like this, and it's called An Invitation to Die or Invitation to Die. And it
Yeah.
really is sort of a tribute, if you will, or focuses on community dialogue and police shootings, a tribute to Trayvon Martin. And when I saw the piece performed, I mean, this is not your mama's orchestra, okay? As they say, not your
No.
mama's chicken soup and not your this I have never seen anything like this where the librettist the was African American male who was in locks. He wore a hoodie. The entire orchestra wore black hoodies. There were highs and lows. I mean, but there was a real story being told in this piece. I mean, tell me how how did you put this together? I mean, it really is extraordinary. And I want to encourage all of the listeners to please go to your website, NkeiruOkoye.com, and it will also be in the written piece of the narrative for those who are listening and through iHeart and Spotify and all the other platforms, because it is something like you've never seen before, and everyone needs to experience it. So tell me a little bit about how you put this together.
Yeah. Um, Thank you. Invitation to a Die-In came from a very, very dark place in my life. I'd had a particularly egregious racial trauma that happened to me. And I thought, here are all these degrees that I have. And in the end, the one thing that they saw is Black. Okay. So I'm going to take this and
done that, have the t-shirt.
Yes, we all have. We all have. And I took all of this angst and all of this anger, and I had this concept for this piece. And I thought, okay, I'm going to call this Invitation to a Die-In. And it's going to be, there's the idea behind it was going to be, I'm sorry, I need to start again.
You're fine. You're fine, because I'm totally intrigued.
All right. With Invitation to a Die-In, this was something that came out of a trauma that happened to me. And it was an egregious racial incident that happened. And the bottom line is that after all these degrees, after all these things, what the people saw is Black. And these are experiences that, as a Black woman, as a human being, it changes your perspective. So I took all of that and thought, okay, I'm going to emote into the music. And so I had this, I had this idea for this piece, and it was going to be dedicated to, there were at the time, there were all of these police shootings of unarmed Black men. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this piece. And the idea behind it is that at the end of the piece, everyone in the orchestra, there's going to be sections of them, and this section that they're just going to lay down as if they're dead. And then this section of the piece, they're also laid down as if they're dead. And the only person left standing would be the vocalist, and that person would also then lay down as if dead. And so it's a statement. It's theater.
It is. It is. It's extraordinary. Yeah. Throw that in there too.
Yeah. So there's a piece. It's called Haydn's Farewell Symphony, and in the Farewell Symphony, which is much more cheerful, much more cheerful theme, that has the same thing, though the instructions in the score are not to lay down as if dead. But the point was that sections would go out, and then you'd only have one person left playing. It was kind of a takeoff on that. And I had a librettist, and a librettist is a person who writes the text to a piece of music. And we had worked together on, was it that our first, second? I think that we had done one or two. I think it was maybe our second or third collaboration, and we talked about it because one of us was a Black man, though his being white and my being female, or him being male and my being female and Black. So we talked about it, and so we had a text. And I then thought, okay, there's the spiritual who will be a witness for my Lord. And it starts off with that. And it really ruined that spiritual for me for a long time. Oh, their piece is haunted. But I think of all the pieces that I have, and this is not a happy piece. It ends up, with this theme, with the title, it is not going to end well.
Yeah.
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 And then on top of that, the singer who ended up performing it he was my John Tubman and Harriet Tubman, and we'd known each other for, I think at that point, 8 years. And so we're friends, we're collaborators, and it became personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was writing this piece that is ending with his death. I went through changes on this piece. There's this piece, there's a movie. It's called, what is it? It's with Queen Latifah and Emma Thompson and Will Ferrell. It's called Stranger Than Fiction. And it's
okay.
It's just in the same dilemma. So I ended up calling my friend Damien. I said, Damien, in order to finish this piece, I have to write this scene. And so we had to talk me through this. And so, it's funny now, but at the time it was so incredibly painful. And it just made me think of what it is like to be vulnerable in this way as we are as Black women. And we don't know who's going to come home.
Yes.
Right.
Gosh.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Such an appropriate conversation, even now with the Tyree the situation. I mean, and that's what I like. What I've learned is that, in our, let me see if I can articulate this. In our culture, music has been such a centering piece, right? In terms of throughout generation to generation, there's been songs that have been passed down, but we are known to be moved by music and to move others by music.
Yes.
And what I love about what you're doing is that you really are blazing a trail in sort of an untapped genres, if you will, for many of general African Americans. And what you've done is that you've brought orchestra to life in a way that's relevant to today's times and conversations. And I really hope that everyone gets a chance to experience some of your pieces, because it really isn't, a lot of people don't go to the orchestra. They think it's boring. They think it's this, and they don't know, like, there's a whole movement just happening through your work that they've never seen or experienced before. And you were talking about the pieces that you wrote, being able to emote through them. What is your writing process? How do you bring a piece together? For example, do you begin with a particular instrument and wrap the notes around it, or is it conceived inwardly and, the piece is sort of completed in your head and then you layer it out on paper? What is your writing process?
Well, I think that's a good question. Let me go back though. And, there are Black composers. And I'm going to know more of them than most people because, well, they're my ancestors and my colleagues, and knowing about them changed my life and changed what it was that I was seeing, when I would go out to concerts. And I'm so incredibly excited that there are more of us. Yeah. And that we are welcome in these spaces. And a lot of times I will be that person who I'm that ambassador. People will say, well, I don't like orchestra music. And I remember with Harriet Tubman, which is an opera, it's like, oh, really? That's a harder sell than orchestra. People, this is just something on Harriet Tubman. Just come out, you'll love it. And so they would just come out, but
all I knew was Porgy and Bess. I didn't even know anything. Prior to meeting you, I would have not known some of these pieces.
Right. So I am not the only one, but I do thank you for that. But I just wanted to, just to say that. But in terms of how I come up with ideas, it's changed a bit now that I am well, this is just what I do. So most pieces start off with someone will call me up or contact my website and say, okay, I want you to write a piece about X, Y, and Z. And most of the times it's for a specific performer or a group of performer or some kind of ensemble. So the idea then is already kind of preset.
Okay.
Now, I do have some pieces like with Invitation to a Die-In or Briar Patch, which is a retelling of Brer Rabbit and the Briar Patch.
Yeah, that is
I just,
delightfully whimsical. I
we
loved it. It is so much fun.
we had a lot of fun with that piece.
Yeah.
Now see, that was one of these things where I have this little, I have a little folder. I call it my idea garden. And
Okay.
if someone asks, I want you to write something, but what is it that you want me to, what is it something that you want to work on? And I'll say, well, I have this little idea garden. Let me throw this idea at you. So sometimes that happens, but far more often, I just had a pianist actually, this piece premiered just earlier today. There was a pianist who called me up and she contacted my website and she said, okay, I have this idea for a piano requiem and I want you to write one movement of it. I said, okay, all right. And so we would talk about this. And so I said, what's the ideas? What do you have? And then I do a second interview. And this is specific. I want to know more about the person. If it's a singer, I want to know more about that person's voice.
Okay.
And as we tease out that idea, I'll get some, that person will sound happier, sadder, more excited, just through their vocal inflections. And so I'll pick up on some of that. In the case of this pianist, a requiem is basically a mass for the dead. And we've dealt with this pandemic.
Can you say that again, please? About what a requiem is?
A requiem is a mass for the dead.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. So throughout history, there are masses, and this is just the mass for the dead.
Okay.
And which is not an uplifting topic, and we don't always have to have uplifting topics. But I thought, let's give people something to root for. And so just tossed it out as an idea. And so as we were talking later on, she liked the idea of giving people something to root for. And so, through that, I then came up with a couple of things. I asked her about some favorite things that she had. And so I came up with something that she really, really, really liked. And, it's a lot of it's just negotiating, talking to people and saying, hey, my idea, you've come to me with this idea.
So it's a bit of a dance.
I had this. Yeah. There was another piece with the Detroit Symphony. It was called Black Bottom. So
that was a good one. And lots of unspoken messages there and tributes to Black churches, civil rights, and COFA. So yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I get it. Starts off, I get this message either on my email or through the website, and it says, Nkeiru, we want to talk to you. It is the Detroit Symphony. So I'm very motivated to get back in touch with them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they're having the centennial of Symphony Hall. And I was one of the composers that they're choosing to take part of the celebration. So they were going to commission me to write something. And their only stipulation was that they wanted to know if I could find a way to tie it to Detroit.
Ah, okay.
Right. And so, do you remember that piece that I mentioned, Voices Shouting Out? There was a conductor. Okay. That was the symphony. That was the professional symphony that gave me a professional reading of that piece. And it was that conductor who was a man named Thomas Wilkins, who just decided, I like this piece. So 20 years later, they're calling me and saying, hey,
Wow.
I want you to do this. I was very, very thankful, and I was humbled, and I was motivated. So I worked with them and said, okay, what ideas do you have? Here's my idea, here's yours. And I started reading about Detroit. And as I was reading about historic Detroit, and obviously Black historic Detroit, I came up on this story of Black Bottom, which was a neighborhood. And the neighborhood was destroyed
Mm-hmm.
deliberately due to gentrification. And
Ah,
once I read about it, I said, that's it. That's the story.
yeah.
That and once I knew that, I then said, okay, I need to go there. And so the folks at the orchestra, we did a little residency, and I came in and I spoke to people who were in the neighborhood. We went on a tour.
Yeah, I did the research. Yeah, the groundwork.
Yeah. And so meeting all of these different people, and I set up an interview process, and each of them I asked, I think it was 5 or 6 questions. And most of the people were African American. And of course, most people don't go to the orchestra concerts. And so by doing this, they all then were motivated to come to the concert and to tell friends, because
Yeah.
I'm a composer and I'm writing about them. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, there were 9 sections or 9 movements, we would call them, in this piece. And each of them was a different vignette of a
Mm-hmm.
different neighborhood that was in there. And I
Sure.
remember one of them was record a record shop. It's a movement called Shops on Hastings. And I
Mm-hmm.
spoke to this one woman. She is an oral historian, and her father owned a record shop. And she said, and I was interviewing her, she said, and they would answer the phone, Joe's record shop. And so that movement goes bum, ba-da-dump, bum, ba-da-dum. I'm sorry, I'm a bit raspy.
No, you're fine.
That Joe's record shop, and you hear it going back and forth, echoing in the orchestra, so those type of things will give me ideas. I also had this was one of these pieces that had all these different ideas, and so they were formed in different type of ways. There was another one with, let's see, okay, there was a clubhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a fantastic story about this clubhouse, and this was during the time of segregation. And I remember the tour guide that we had told us, he stopped in front of this amazing, huge, huge house and said, okay, so this is the story of this clubhouse. This is the daughters of, let's see, the DAWC, the Detroit Association of Women's Clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of this clubhouse was that the woman had bought the property, and her neighbors said, we don't want, Black people are not allowed to live on this street. So
Okay. Yeah.
during the time of segregation, but
Yeah.
she's, very wealthy and very, well, it was a corner lot that this house was on. So she boarded up the entrance, and she opened the one on the street where Black people were allowed to live.
I love it.
I love this story. And her name was Dr. Rosa Slade Gregg. And when I spoke to the president of the clubhouse, she
Uh-huh.
was emphatic. She was like, and people don't know her name, and they need to know there's another Rosa. It's not just Rosa Parks. You have to know about Dr. Rosa Slade Gregg. And so
Ah.
you hear Dr. Rosa Slade Gregg. And I don't remember how many times these vocalists say it, but people, they know her name now.
Yeah. We all know her name now. There's another Rosa.
Yeah, yeah. So it's this woman was amazing, amazing. The things that she did for Black women, for Black people at that time. The stories just needed to be told. And
Mm-hmm.
so, just what a great tribute to her efforts, and to all of the different people, the way that they lived. And this is another thing that, organizations are looking to tribute Black people, but a lot of the time there's so much emphasis is spent on our struggle.
Yes.
and what is that has happened to us, and it victimizes us. And it either
Yes.
makes us perpetual victims or perpetually angry.
Yes. Yes.
People in
Yes.
need of social justice, because they say it's social justice, but it really makes us people in need of social justice.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of your thoughts on it one way or the other, I never want to be in a situation where people are thinking of all of us and stigmatizing us in that way. And so I want to talk about the way that we lived, because people need to know that there's more to us than this struggle.
Yes.
Yes, we
Gosh,
live the
yes.
struggle, but oh my goodness, we live, we have rich lives. So Black Bottom was really about the way that people lived in this neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
The Tales from the Briar Patch. A lot of people said, well, you can't do something on Brer Rabbit. Of course you can. It's from our culture.
Yeah.
So we can laugh. And if you watch this video, you see these are the roots of American musical theater. It's the roots of American music, period. And, we have these three birds, and they're women and they're church ladies. And they're looking at the antics of Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And it is hilarious, and it's done in stylized speech, but it's not a speech that is slave dialect. It's not coming
Right.
from the. I'm celebrating our culture. Another concept that I have. There was a group, Harlem Chamber Players,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked with them a long, long time ago. They came up and said they wanted to commission me for something, and I said, okay. And what I ended up doing is something about a Black woman going to the symphony, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't really think about this. And so here's this Black woman. It's called We Met at the Symphony.
We met
And
at
so
the
it's about
symphony.
Black love. Right, right. It's about Black women because there's so much emphasis on our men. And I love our men, but we have stories too. We have experiences too. And
Yeah.
so I'm just like, oh, yes. So I wanted to champion Black love. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
okay. So we met at the symphony. And so, here's this woman, and she never identifies herself as being African American. Now she does use jazz as the music that you associate with her. And
Uh-huh.
so she's telling her story, and it's in three different songs, and she goes through this romance that she has. And so, with this Black man that she meets at the symphony. So so there's different ideas. And as I'm hearing them, as I'm talking through the ideas, I will hear music. I don't have,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's an interesting process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I feel like I'm sitting in a master class right now, okay? And for whoever's listening, there may be more people going to the symphony to hook up, okay? You never know who you're gonna
Well,
meet at the symphony.
sometimes it's true.
Listen, that's where you get the quality and the caliber you're looking for, ladies.
Well,
And
yeah.
gentlemen, go to the symphony and find your lady. Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Now, I know
Um,
we're running and I know we're running out of time, but I have to touch on this. You are one of the few select composers commissioned at Juilliard. That in itself is amazing. Tell us about the work you're doing. What's up next for you? Tell me what's happening at Juilliard. This is just so amazing.
well, um, you know, this Juilliard thing, just to clarify, Juilliard, the the most famous conservatory, gosh, probably in the world, certainly
By
in
far.
the US. Yeah.
Yeah.
They decided it's time to diversify the repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they picked about 40 composers out of all these composers, and they're just non-white composers. They said, okay, so each of you, so they picked, they said, we want you to write audition material so that our students will have this and learn it, and it will be there for the next generation, and it's going to be on their permanent curriculum. So yes. And so you could have blown me over with a feather.
Yeah.
I get this email, and it is a commission from Juilliard, and they wanted me to write songs. And I thought, wow. Okay.
Yeah, died and gone to heaven for sure.
Yeah.
Heaven on earth.
So for these students, it needed to be something that everyone could sing. And, for physical reasons, but also aesthetic reasons, you really don't want to, you can't have a white singer singing I Am Harriet Tubman. Also, the music is gospel music, and it uses a couple of things that are endemic to African American female singers.
Absolutely,
that wouldn't necessarily same physically with other singers, and not everyone would be comfortable with that. So I wanted to choose something that would be more universal, and they wanted 3 songs, and one would be for a soprano, which is the highest voice, and the next would be for a mezzo or an alto, and that is your second voice. And then the third would be for a male voice, and they couldn't decide. I think it was just a matter of, was it going to be the tenor or the baritone? And so I wrote 2 versions of each song. And I thought, let's go to the classics. Let's do that. So, so this song cycle is called Love and Longing. And they are 2 monologues inspired by classic literature.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, I love that.
See, I love me some classic literature.
Me too. Yeah, I have a lit degree, so you had me at classic literature.
People wouldn't necessarily associate me with that. So I thought, wow, this is this great opportunity. And so we're having this conference call. It's this I guess it was a Zoom meeting. And the voice teacher, you could see the surprise in her face when I started quoting passages from the classics. I was like, okay, so why don't we, this it just surprised her. And good, absolutely.
Yeah.
Students, they are doing a great job with it. And it wasn't that I was literate. It was that I loved these passages so much that I was able to quote them.
Yes, because that's what makes them classic. I mean, they actually live with you for a lifetime once you've read some of these famous authors, prose and poetry writers. Yeah.
Yes, but also there's all these movies about them, and I will sit down and I have my Firth days, my Colin Firth, Pride and Prejudice.
Yes, Pride and Prejudice. Oh my God. Get the box of tissue.
So anyway, so with Love and Longing, there's Catherine's monologue where she is talking about her love for Heathcliff, and she's talking about whatever our souls are made of, another belongs with mine. So this is the day that the other one in her life proposes to her, and so she's bemoaning this. And then we have Jane Eyre's aria, where she tells off Rochester. And she's like, do you think I'm a machine? Do you think I can have my glass of water snatched from my lips? I mean, this is dramatic.
Yeah.
So, and then Darcy's proposal, where he's telling Elizabeth that he loves her, but that it's against his own will. I mean, so what I love about these songs, what I love about these moments, is that they're universal. Everyone has love. Everyone longs for something. And the students, I'm just really jazzed about this, because I just was doing a master class with the students just yesterday.
Yeah.
I remember telling one of the girls who was singing "Whatever Our Souls Are Made Of," and I was like, "What would Taylor Swift do with this?" And she was like,
Mm.
she has that "Just Say Yes" song with Romeo and Juliet.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Right. And so she began thinking about that. It just makes you think, and with Jane Eyre's aria. Well, what did Beyonce, what was she channeling? What she's talking about to the left, everything
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have. And yeah, well, that's what Jane Eyre, here she is. And she's saying, okay, I'm done with you.
exactly. Yeah.
You telling him
Make
off.
yeah. Make it relevant. I'm telling you. Make the connections.
So
Yeah.
they are surprisingly modern in their language. And anyway, so Love and Longing will premiere at Juilliard on, I should know this, it's February 11th on
Okay.
Saturday. And it is free and they're going to live stream it.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
yeah. So
Yeah, okay. We're gonna have to put it out there when it's time, so maybe folks can connect through Facebook or
yeah,
Zoom or something. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I want to say too, thank you because I can't remember. You have to forgive me. I can't remember what company you were composing for at the time, but my daughter and I actually listened to some of your pieces along with others for a free live streamed free live stream performances during COVID. And we actually went to the Cheesecake Factory and set up our little phone, and we were sitting there listening to the pieces. It was just amazing. I mean, yeah. So I just want to say thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I think that was with American Opera Project.
Yeah, I
And
can't remember. Yeah, it was just great to
oh,
have that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I'm sorry. I know we're out of time, but before we go, what's
Mhm.
one thing you wish people knew about composers?
Hmm.
I know, right?
Oh, well, composing music is just like being an architect, being
Mm,
an artist, being a lawyer, being a doctor. If this is something that you gravitate to, this is something that you are skilled in,
mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
you take the coursework and you go do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And you are making the path for all those who have a dream to be in classical music, to compose, to have their work heard, their voices heard in unique and extraordinary ways. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. And of course, we'll have you back, and I will definitely look out for the piece in Juilliard so that we all can enjoy it in the comforts of our own home and just really make a night of it. So, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
this has been wonderful.
Christy.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. And as always, thank you for being a team player.